always, you are joining us live with Startup Grind Charleston, and I'm the chapter director. My name is Alex Cottingham, and I'm so pleased and so honored to be joined by Lauren Culbertson tonight. She just has such a great story. I know it's probably not the easiest one to tell, Lauren, but it was a conversation that I didn't know I needed. So I'm so excited to have you here with our community tonight. To just share kind of your story, LoopVOC, and then of course 2020. So just to kind of set a little bit of groundwork for everyone, Lauren was supposed to be on this stage with us in person last year, I think for our February event, 2020. And then of course, things happened. And here we are, it's a year later. So in a way, I feel like it was kind of destiny that we reconnected this time, because it seems like you had a pretty interesting 2020 and a lot of lessons that came out of that. So if everyone will virtually, I know we can't see you all, but one of our Startup Grind traditions is that whenever our speaker joins us on stage, we stand up and give them a standing ovation. So I have just a little, well, I'll just give you some snaps tonight, Lauren. So
thank you.
In the chat, people will have some little applause emojis for us. So yeah, let's jump right to waste a few minutes learning how to use Bevy this evening. Lauren is the co-founder and CEO of LoopVOC, and her company leverages the power of artificial intelligence and natural language processing to help B2B SaaS companies collect and analyze their customer feedback. So Lauren, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And as we kind of get started, I had this question when I was preparing for this, but I was wondering if you could help me define a few things, specifically, what is LoopVOC? What does it stand for? And then could you help us define product marketing? Because I think that'll really set the stage for a lot of our conversation tonight. And if some of our audience isn't as familiar with those terms, I think it would be good on our part to catch them up to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So LoopVOC, the kind of meaning behind the name, we are a customer feedback analytics platform. So we help companies close the loop on customer feedback, where a lot of customer feedback platforms are focused on the collection. We're really focused on leveraging that information to take action. And the VOC stands for voice of the customer. So that is a big part of the role of product marketing, which product marketers are really the strategic growth engines at SaaS companies. So it's a common role in a software company where they're really taking what product management prioritizes on the roadmap to market. So if you think about when a product is being built, someone has to decide how it's packaged, how it's positioned, the value proposition, the pricing. Product marketing is really responsible for all of that.
Got it. Thank you for defining. I was like, who better to tell us than Lauren herself? So Lauren, were you always interested in product marketing, or did you, when did you first learn about this?
Yeah, so when I started out in the SaaS space or at Blackbaud, I started out as a BDR. And I then became interested in marketing when I saw that a lot of the decisions were being made around what we were selling and how we were, given call scripts in marketing. And so because I started out listening to customer feedback and understanding, what market needs were really changing, I latched onto that as a BDR.
Got it. And can you define that for us as well, for those who may not be familiar with that position and what we do all day?
Sorry, I'm getting some really weird feedback. I don't know if you can hear it, so it's hard for me to think. Are you not getting it?
No, I can hear you well. That could be on my end, but I don't have anything going on in here. So what I can do is when I'm not asking a question, I'll just turn my mic off. So hopefully it doesn't disturb you. Is it just when I'm talking or when it?
It's actually just when I'm talking. So maybe if you try muting, that would help. So defining BDR, yep, all right, now it's done. Thank you. All right, so defining a BDR. So BDR is the entry point into an organization when it comes to sales. So they are the people that are doing the cold calls, they are reaching out, engaging prospects, and trying to get them to become leads. And then it's business development representative is what it's commonly called. It's also called SDR, for sales development representative. And that's really an entry point into sales, but also marketing, because a lot of times marketing will have BDRs do campaigns where they're calling on target accounts to try to educate them about new offerings, understand pains, and things like that.
Got it. And you mentioned Blackbaud. I know you spent quite some time there. Are you from Charleston originally? How did you land this position at Blackbaud?
I'm not from Charleston originally, so I am from Maryland, between DC and Baltimore, and I went to college for undergrad at Clemson. And my last year that I was there, I got an internship at American Red Cross. And when I was there in the fall, I wasn't using any technology. I was just helping our executive director with a lot of marketing events. And then in the spring, she introduced me to software that she used to really run her business. And that was the Razor's Edge, which is Blackbaud's flagship product. And that was the first business-to-business software that I'd ever been exposed to. And I'd always wondered how she did all that she did. And in my mind, this just opened up like how it was a one-person shop because it was a small branch of American Red Cross of Pickens County, but how she was able to do so much. And so I became extremely passionate about software, and then kind of ultimately wanted to work for the company that created it. So I kind of leveraged that experience into my interview process and getting my first job out of college, which was working at Blackbaud as an entry-level sales professional.
Got it. So at what point, I guess, in your professional life did you, really start to dive into and transition from sales into product marketing?
Yeah. So, being an SDR or BDR is a tough job because you're being held to higher and higher standards. When I was in the role, which was, over 10 years ago now, we had to make 60 phone calls a day. And back then it was still by hand. Right now you can just click a button and it will auto dial it for you. But it was making 60 dials a day. And, on 70 of those calls, most of them, they're not going to pick up. You're going to leave a voicemail. If you do get someone, they're going to tell you, move on, no. And, you probably get one lead a day, which is someone saying, yes, maybe I will talk to a salesperson. But one of the things that I was most interested in was, for those 20 calls that I could actually get on the phone that would tell me no, understanding that, well, why not? Why aren't you interested? And a lot of times it was because there was a perception that they had of Blackbaud. Other times it was that, they had a need that was different that we couldn't serve. But to me, that was kind of the most interesting part of my job, was that there's all these different trends of what was going on in the market. This was nonprofits buying software. And the thing that I noticed out of the gate was there wasn't really a channel for me to give that information. So there was a very clear channel for me to give information about people who said yes, people who said, this is why I want to buy. But there was no collection process for all the why nots. And to me, that was how we could really grow as a company, right? Is fixing the things that you're missing. So because of that, I was constantly telling people without being solicited what I was learning. And the people that were actually most interested were the marketing people. And I had a interest in marketing because that's what I did my undergrad. That was my major in undergrad. But, once I really understood how they were taking insights from other ways of collecting it in places like surveys, I learned that they were really responsible for acting like the voice of the customer and the voice of the market to the rest of the company. And so once I understood that they were the ones that could kind of serve up these insights to other places in the companies, like product management or even, customer success, support to make changes, I wanted to be in that kind of centralized group so that I could really be the voice of the customer, the voice of the market, and use my insight around frontline employees like sales and support having more information and more knowledge about the customer than any survey could get you to really change some of the practices that we had at Blackbaud to listen to customers and change and evolve based on that.
Making sure I unmute before I follow up with my other questions. So at what point during your tenure at Blackbaud did you really start focusing on Loop? Was it a hard stop and you were like, this is my last day at Blackbaud and I'm going all in on Loop? Was there a more, I guess, overlap in that transition? Talk to us about kind of your decision and figuring out that you had this other calling outside of Blackbaud.
Yeah, so, the best way I can describe this, and I've said this before, is that this problem, the reason I created Loop, it haunted me from the day I started in the corporate world. It was a problem that I saw at almost every angle, from being on the front line and not being heard, to even before then being a customer of Blackbaud and seeing the gaps, to being in product marketing and spending so much money on surveys when I knew that customers were giving feedback in these more transactional places every day. But there just wasn't a good way to harness it. And so I got the opportunity to really change the way we were doing things at Blackbaud when we decided to move to be a cloud company, which was in 2014. The current CEO started, and that was, from day one, a huge focus he had. And I really credit the evolution of Loop and really like the starting point to that, because I could actually put into practice some of these ideas I had about how companies can leverage feedback in a more impactful way. And so the reason that I got to do that is because, before that point, Blackbaud had really been focused on selling really big software deals and what's called on-premise. So basically, you own the software, or you have the software on your own servers, and we're going to sell that to you for one big amount of money, and then you pay maintenance. And now this is moving to, you rent the software, we serve it all, we host it all, and you're going to pay us ongoing. And so what that means is you suddenly have to care a lot more about keeping your customers happy, because you don't just sell them the car and then they're on their own, they're renting it from you. And so retention became more important, and understanding how we were doing in this shift to be a cloud-based company was more important. And so I got the opportunity to create processes for taking all the information that was already being given to us from customers, and then creating a process that bubbled that up to senior leadership, so that every week we would meet and say, here are the top issues we're hearing from sales, support, marketing, here's how often it's happening. Here's the impact to revenue based on deals that are being lost or deals that customers that are leaving. And every week, the C-suite would get this information, and we could actually make decisions and changes every week to things like our product roadmap priorities or our offers and pricing, or even just the way we were positioning things in the sales process. And, Blackbaud's a pretty big company. For a software company, usually things get convoluted. I'd say even like when you get to 500 employees working with software companies, that's all we work with now. Like even then, things start to slow down. So the fact that things could go so fast, based on what customers were saying, was really powerful. And you can see from, Blackbaud's growth during that time, if you look at like 2015 through 2018, where these processes were really in place. I believe that a systemic factor of that was the closeness to the market and the closeness to customers. So being able to see the power of that, and then most importantly, how that changed company culture for sales reps to feel like their voice was heard and like they had control of their own destiny of, how they were bringing new customers on, and same for support and customer success, was really powerful, and it changed the whole dynamic around, the perception in the marketplace at that time. And so around that time, I was getting my MBA, and I had a focus in entrepreneurship and got to go to Denmark during that. And through that, I got to visit a lot of accelerators. And in one of those accelerators, I was exposed to the process, or natural language processing, which is a form of AI that scans through all this textual feedback and can bubble up key themes based on trained data that would be really good at predicting similar words that mean the same thing, but are used in very business specific context. And that's when it clicked for me that this problem that had been haunting me could be automated by technology. And so I quickly, scanned, I was on my phone and was looking up natural language processing, artificial intelligence, deep learning, text analytics, just to understand how far along the technology was. I knew AI, was a buzzword at the time, but a lot of times it fell flat in terms of how accurately it could predict and actually be useful. And found that it really was at this perfect timing of the technology was far enough along where there's experts, but it was early enough where it hadn't been leveraged for business-specific use cases through and through. So it was a great time for a non-technical person to take advantage of something that, I had a very deep business problem I was solving. And then my job was to set out and find a technical partner that could execute on that from the technology side. And so when I got back home, which was like a week later, I hired data scientists on Upwork, which is a freelance service hiring, and tested out with 2 or 3, gave them a bunch of textual feedback, had them build a model to see if they could accurately predict, based on what I already done manually, the key themes that were coming out of it. So if you got a bunch of closed opportunities with deal notes that were saying a specific feature was lost, being able to understand every line of text to bubble up the top feature that was lost is an example. And so I after about 3 found, okay, this could actually work. And at that point I was kind of bootstrapping. That was all my own money going into that. And then that was the hard period, because it was like, okay, do I stay around and try to keep moonlighting? I wasn't even sure if that was ethical at the time. Now I know that a lot of entrepreneurs, most entrepreneurs do that, but I felt very torn, because I was also, I was a director at Blackbaud at that time. I had a team, and it was very hard for me to not give my 100%, which is kind of required if you're moonlighting. You kind of have to step back. And so ultimately I decided that I would set very clear milestones, that would make me okay with taking that jump. Because I think that's the hardest part for entrepreneurs, is actually taking the leap. And if you break it down into, okay, what are those anxiety points? Like, what is holding me back? A lot of times it's, fear of failure. Other times it's very much more direct in that it's, if you can't support yourself without a salary, then you would need to get enough revenue or fundraise to be able to do that. I had saved up enough from just from working that I used that instead of buying a new car or something like that. I used it to get myself a certain amount of time without a salary. But to get over my fear of, I guess you could say, fear of failure, honestly, is what it was, which is like a dirty word in entrepreneurship. But it was a fear of, is this even a good idea? I kind of set up 3 milestones. One was build a prototype so I could actually see if something like this could become a product. Low investment, but could make it real. 2 was get 10 B2B software companies, which is our target market, to say that they would buy this, and it wouldn't just be friends that would tell me nice things. It would need to be like actual leads. And then 3, find investment so I can hire a technical co-founder. And so I got the prototype and then got the 10 customers. And then I put in my month's notice at Blackbaud. And my last day of Blackbaud is when we signed the final term sheets for our first friends and family round. So, and then that's when we got I went to find my technical founder too.
And just for a time frame context, can you remind us what year that was that this big transition happened?
Yeah, so I had on my whiteboard all of these milestones. I even have the screenshot of it because I printed it out at the time. But it was the goal at the top was leave Blackbaud but leave by November 2018. And these were the milestones of what I needed to do before then. So again, it was MVP, hustle 10 customers, find investment. And so I think it was probably in the spring that I had done the work with the data scientists, because here I have build the MVP and get that built in July. And I did leave November 2018 was my last, November 1st, 2018 was my last day at Blackbaud.
Impeccable timing. So you're a woman of, that's how I interpret all of that. Before we dive in, because you really had 2019 was your full window year of just running all in with Loop. But before we dive into that, and I definitely want to make sure that we spend some attention on 2020. So I'll kind of approach that as phase 2 of Loop. But can you just quickly share some of the other barriers or challenges? I know you talked about fear of failure, but what were some other, whether they were mental or very literal challenges that you were struggling with in addition to this fear of failure and making this leap?
Yeah, I think, when I set out, I knew that I would have 3 big challenges that were very apparent to me. One was being a non-technical founder and wanting to start a software company that was leveraging very new and emerging technology that, most non-technical founders, including myself, don't have a huge network of technical partners that you just, I wish it was different, but a lot of times, especially, for females, I didn't have a bunch of technical friends. My dad actually is very technical and helped a lot in the beginning, but I knew that would be a challenge. Second was being in the Southeast. That is was a real challenge. I think it actually is less of a challenge now that we're in this COVID world. But I mean, the amount of VCs that told me that they wouldn't invest because there's not a direct flight to Charleston, it's real. Like, there's less access to money. VCs in the Southeast tend to focus more on other things, not software. There are exceptions, but those exceptions tend to get involved later on. And especially when, you're a first-time founder, there's a lot more risk for them to invest in you early on. And so I think bootstrapping is the best scenario for an early stage startup in the Southeast, at least at the time, that I was starting up. I think that could change. And then the third was being, a female founder in the technical space. I knew that would be a challenge, just simply because there are less mentors, and I'm a strong believer in mentorship, really getting you to that next level. And that was just a challenge that I went after very aggressively, and was lucky enough to find great mentors and advisors to help make that challenge probably the smallest challenge. The technical partner challenge was the biggest upfront, and the one that I had to learn. It wasn't just like a lesson learned once. It was a lesson learned once, twice, 3 times, probably will continue to learn forever. But I have a really, really strong technical partner now that I can share lessons on, like, what I would look for if I was to do it all over again. But yeah, those were kind of the initial challenges. I think, another challenge that I didn't realize, but actually was my biggest challenge in hindsight, was that I was creating something that didn't exist, which, when you're thinking about starting a company, I don't know, for me, that's all the ideas I would think about, because, you watch Shark Tank and they're like, well, someone already does this. Like, that's what you think. So you think, oh, well, I have to create something that no one does. It doesn't even exist. But most companies don't do that, and it's way, way harder to create. It's called creating a category. When you don't have competitors, there's nothing to compare yourself to, and you're fighting against status quo. You're getting companies like Blackbot. There wasn't just a software that we could buy to do what we did manually. Like, we were fighting against status quo, and that's a lot harder than fighting against someone else in the market that's doing something similar to you, but is at least training people the value that you provide. So that first year, I'd say, of like 2019, and that kind of gets into what's called product market fit. It makes product market fit a lot slower, especially when you don't have a lot of money to spend in marketing and really building your brand of, again, solving this problem that no one even knows that it is a problem.
So I want to backpedal a little bit, because I know that you shared your first real big challenge that you had to face was finding this technical co-founder. You've told us that, you come from a product and marketing background, so you outsourced these contractors to help with your MVP. But now, in order to really build Loop, you needed that person. It's not really just something that's easily outsourced. Can you tell us kind of what happened on your search for that co-founder?
Yes. So I started out, I think, probably one of my learnings from the beginning was just in general hiring. Because it was my first time hiring anyone technical, and then my first time being the CEO of a startup, I overcompensated with salary and benefits, as bad as that sounds, and undercompensated with selling the idea of what we were doing. And I think that, today, my goals of like raising money before I found the technical co-founder, I would have switched those so that I found the technical co-founder and then raised money, because now my technical co-founder will get into like the hardships of 2020, but the person I found, the person that's like been there through thick and thin, like wasn't taking a salary for a bit of time. So it wasn't about the salary and the benefits for him. It was about the problem we were solving and his ability to make something like that happen, which, seems obvious probably, but I think if it's on either side, if it's a non-technical finding a technical, or because I was just talking to him about this before the call, and he's a second-time founder, and his first company, he couldn't find the non-technical partner. He had the same problems I did, but on the other side, in that he wanted someone so bad to like make his baby happen that he paid him great money and, gave them good benefits. But at the end of the day, like it wasn't the right person. And I think what makes it the right person is someone that, again, really, really connects with the idea. So has experienced the problem firsthand, but then also is motivated less by stability and more by impact, and doing something that seems impossible. And then also just like really basic things like humility, just things get stressful when you're working a lot of hours for very little pay. And so being able to still maintain being a good person, a kind person, goes a long, long way. And I know I've struggled I know startups, I think the number one reason startups fail is because of co-founder issues. So that should tell you how hard it is to find that right match. But I think it's something I would have taken more time on, and I probably would have gotten where I am at the same speed or even faster if I was so focused on checking the boxes. Because of that, you leave your corporate job and you want to be successful so fast that it felt like finding co-founder month one was success, when really, like, if I didn't find that until 6 months, like the clock wouldn't have started. I wouldn't be burning money, and it could have been, a lot faster than kind of learning that the hard way.
Well, as you said, it sounds like you found a good fit in your technical co-founder now, despite having made some mistakes early on and maybe not prioritizing the way you now wish you had then. Can you tell me, and then we'll get into kind of what 2020 looks like for you and for Loop. But by the end of 2019, what did Loop look like? How many people did you officially have on your team? How did you feel about product market fit? Because I know it was a journey and a challenge for you to get that far and understand what product market fit is or was for Loop at the time.
Yeah. So in 2019, we raised more money. So in 2018, November, I left Loop and then found technical co-founder. And then we spent the first half of the year building the MVP, the minimum viable product, to launch. And then we got our first customer in August, paying customer. And then we got 3 or 4 additional customers the next few months. And during that time, we'd also fundraised, because it was like, at that mindset at that time, it was, you raise, you build your team, and then the growth will come, which is the opposite approach that I'm taking now. And I think that most startups are taking now. But I did all of that. And so I brought on additional engineers. I brought on a sales partner and marketing. And so there were 6 of us in 2019 when we're ending it. And, our pipeline was growing. We went into January, and every month we were bringing on more customers than the month before. Our pipeline was making it look like that would continue. And then, 2020 happened.
To be on startup grind. So
yes. Yes.
So if you don't mind, and share as much as you certainly feel comfortable to, and I don't know if I'm the best person to guide the progression of what happened in 2020, but kind of walk us through. It seemed like if there was a playbook for Startup 101, it seems like you were checking every box, right? Like you went out, you had these goals, you did them, you built your MVP, you had product market fit, you were acquiring a lot of customers. And that, I think, is, and anyone in the chat, you can definitely say like this is wrong, but I think like anyone who's building a company would see all of this as promising signs, and just go into their next full year of business really optimistic. And yeah, so but then 2020 kind of turned everything around on all of us. So what happened in Loop whenever COVID hit?
Yeah, I'll first say, like, I don't know either, but I wouldn't say like we nailed the playbook 100. I don't think any first-time founder can say they nailed the playbook 100%. So like there are mistakes that I made that I will not make again. Let's just say that. But I did feel like we were learning from those mistakes, and we were on a trajectory. What happened was something that, happened to a lot of companies, big and small, is, as soon as, the week of March 12th happened, pipeline froze, because every company was just in complete like survival mode. So, luckily, like we were able to keep our existing customers for the most part, but it was just, we were becoming a nice to have for companies before that were, very open to trying us. They saw the problem we were solving, but then suddenly it was like, whoa, this is not the mission critical, like, software. It's on hold. And so that, given that we had 6 people on the payroll, was going to be a big problem because we were burning through a lot more money than we were bringing in. And so we had to start cutting back, and also start fundraising. So the hardest part about 2020 for me personally was that I spent the whole year fundraising. Well, until I really was like half the year, because stopped fundraising in August. But the biggest challenge with that is just, we pitched to 96 investors and, was told no 95 times. And then the one that said yes at the end, it was something that happens to very few startups, that, this is something I can't blame on COVID, and which made it more tragic, is that the term sheet just fell through, and that is not something that's supposed to happen. So that just felt like bad luck, which, startup, any founder will say that they've had their fair share of, for sure, and you just got to keep going. But the hardest part about, just 2020 in general was it just made it so when we thought we had product market fit, because we had all this pipeline and we were really starting to see companies that were like embracing the idea, when the world stops, you realize that you don't have product market fit, and that really this was going to be a nice to have. And so we had to like reinvent kind of the problem we were solving. And really just focused on the people, on what we could do. So there was one week, and I don't think we talked about this, Alex, when we were prepping for this. But I was thinking about it today, where we had $30,000 left in the bank, and we stopped payroll because that was going to eat into everything. The 30,000 was like our protection. And in that week, we were still fundraising. On Monday, we found out there was a bug in our code that sent a cyclical error through the Google platform that in an hour charged us $50,000. On Tuesday, we found out that we were being sued by a company in Canada who actually had the rights to our trademark because the patent office that gave us our trademark did so erroneously. So we had a patent on it, but it was offered in error. And then on that Thursday, we found out that even though we'd gotten a term sheet for our 96th try at getting money, for $1.5 million, that they couldn't secure the funds and the deal was going to be null and void. And so at that point, you ask yourself, is this a sign from the universe? Like, this is a sign from the universe. This, you know what? It was a good run. First time founder is a real term. Second time founder, it'll be different. But in that moment, ultimately what kept me going was just not being able to face our customers and not being able to say, we're giving this up, because they were at that time just actively using it so much and doing so many big things at their companies with this data. And so that, like, it really was our customers that it was just like, well, we're going to keep going another month. We don't need to fold yet. Like, we will keep going, and then that will give us our customers more time. And that, like, just being able to stick calmly through the issues based on our customers made it so it's like, okay, and having amazing advisors as well. Okay, let's call Google. Let's find out how to talk to the chief customer officer at Google and see if they can forgive us. And somehow they forgave us enough, not all the way, that we weren't bankrupt. And same thing with the trademark issue. It became a non-issue. So then it was just who can keep going. And really it came down to me and my technical partner. And, but then for the first time, like, I was not fundraising. And so it was a freeing experience to not be trying to push things through that weren't naturally happening. I mean, sales, anything, but me being on the front line, selling, working with customers, figuring it out, and Barry, my technical partner, building. And so it was that was the last 4 months of 2019. And I really don't think anyone thought that we were going to make it, but we basically just said, if we can get to the end of the year by this certain milestone for revenue, we'll keep going. Otherwise, like, Barry, you know, he would have depleted his savings. Like, it wouldn't have been able to do it anymore. And then we just kept going, and then things just started clicking. I will not declare victory yet, but I do think that we are very close to having product market fit, and we're just going to keep going slowly and paying for ourselves. And now we have enough money where we can pay everything and, you know, even hire additional people soon. So, so yeah, that was 2020.
You know, we didn't talk about that. I didn't realize all of that, those big life and business occurrences were in just 1 week. I can't imagine, like, where was your mind at by the end of the week? I mean, I know you said, you know, is this a sign from the universe? How do you just motivate yourself to keep going and kind of process the information and it seems like, just from what we've talked about and what you've shared with us, you have a very good mind for putting out steps, like next steps of things I need to do. How do you pick yourself up? Do you lean on your co-founder, your advisors? Your customers, I know, are a big driving force behind why you kept Loop up and running. But just like behind the scenes as a founder, who was helping you, if anyone? What was how did you do it?
It's kind of a mix. So like I am a pretty weird person, but also like I connect with the universe. This is weird. I'm very intuitive. So like I just need time to be with myself and clear my head, you know, and this is pretty normal, like going for a walk or a run, but just also, you know, every time there was a big hit in 2020, I was cloudy for a weekend, and then it was just like, okay, I would talk to advisors, talk to my husband, talk to, you know, people that were close, but not too close where they could give an outside point of view. And then I was like, all right, here's the path forward. Let's do it. That week after the investment fund pulled out, I lost my like sense of connection with the world and my intuitive powers, or whatever you want to call it, for like 3 weeks. So that was the hardest part, was just like not knowing what to do next, truly. And again, the only thing that I could do at that time was one foot in front of the other. I'm not going to turn off. I just couldn't bring myself to turn off access for our customers. Like that honestly was all that kept me going. And the fact that I had a technical co-founder who was as committed to what we were doing as I was. And so that bought me time to start to see connections and start to realize we don't need a lot to sustain ourselves. And the whole thing about raising money and going fast is if you're in a competitive landscape where someone else in, you know, Silicon Valley can raise a bunch of money and then boom, they have a 20-person team doing exactly what you do and you're obsolete. Like that's why you raise money and get ahead of it. But I just didn't see that happening. Like, and that could be my next founder mistake, is that I'm too naive thinking that won't happen. And I know at a certain point that it will, or it could. But right now, like, it's just all about what's that next thing I need to do to keep going. And that way, when we do fundraise again, like we don't need to. So it's much different in my mind how that will go versus when you do that too early, you can just make bad decisions for the startup. You know, you want to show growth, and so you're pushing things through that aren't really great, and those customers are going to leave you not long after. So it's just slow and steady, I guess.
Well, more power to you and Barry too for sticking with it. I think that's just a testimony to, you know, you having made the mistakes at the beginning to get to the point where you found that co-founder that was a fit for you. So is it just you and Barry still at this point? And I know your husband and your dad help out, but primarily is it just you and Barry?
Yeah, Barry and I are full time, and then we have, you know, really good support from our advisors, and then also my husband is like, he does a lot, and so does my dad, like you mentioned. So they're part time, but we're very grateful for them.
For sure. It takes a village, I think. So yeah. It seems like your tribe is really close knit and just fortunate to all have each other. So I'm going to take a step back because I do want to make sure that we save some time at the end. I know we're already at the end, and I know we started a little behind, so sorry again, everyone. But I want to make sure we have time for questions. So folks, if you'll drop it in the chat. And Lauren, my final question for you, and it'll kind of bring us back to the beginning, is, you know, you talked about product market fit and customer success and, voice of customer. And that's kind of all in a nutshell of why Loop exists. So if you had to give your advice on 3 things a company should do when it comes to building out their customer success strategy, what are 3 things that come to mind?
So I think it depends on the stage of company, but I'll focus on it as like if you're just building it out for the first time. I would say first would be to go deep with your most successful customers to really understand the commonalities in what they're doing to use your platform. And that can be from, use cases and buttons they're pushing to how their team is set up, problems they're solving, and really use that to create the ideal customer profile for who you want to create more of. The second would be founders should be that person 100% in the beginning. So like don't outsource it at the beginning. And then I'd say once you are at that point where you need to scale yourself, you'll have the playbook because I think it's very unique to every company, and more and more companies are competing on that. And then the third would be to make sure you're leveraging data and all the analytics you can around. And this is like more specific to a software product, but I think it starts with usage and understanding. Again, where people are dropping off in your product and where they're getting value out of your tools that you might not have expected. And then similarly, like things that you thought were solving a problem for them and what they'd ask for, like if they're not using it, that can tell you that you were focused too much on, the features they were asking for, not on the problem they were trying to solve. So yeah, those are, I'd say, the 3.
Thank you. I know I felt like we got so zoomed in on Loop and just 2020, but I was like, I have to bring it back out because if you all get the chance to listen in on any of the past podcasts that Lauren has been on, so just as like to peel back the curtain a little bit, I spent hours listening to podcasts before I ever spoke to her in person, and I came out of it more knowledgeable. I don't know if I'm wiser because that's like a character flaw of mine, but I definitely came out more knowledgeable than before. So if that's something that, especially, as we've seen it in Lauren's case with 2020, like holding on to your customers really could be the difference between life and death. So I think if there's anyone to learn from when it comes to your customer success strategy, Lauren has a lot of knowledge that she's already shared. So it freely exists on the internet, but of course you can always connect with her on LinkedIn as well. So I'm just going to bring Emily back on to help field some of the questions that came in. So Emily, let me add you back into the stage with us. And then Lauren, what Emily and I will do is just kind of split the questions that some of our community has asked. So Emily, if you want, do you want to go through the general chat and take those questions out, or do you want to do the Q&A and I'll just pull the ones that came in through the general chat?
Well, I kind of streamlined them all into the Q&A, so we can kind of just go from there.
Okay, cool.
Lauren, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. It's really nice to hear like a female founder kind of talk about her journey. So I really enjoyed that. So the first question is from Amanda, and she said, I'm a female non-tech founder who's in the process of advancing tech for scalability. Where do you recommend looking or networking with potential tech co-founders?
So tricky, and I still feel like I don't have a great, perfect answer for this, but I can tell you like my journey for it. So one was leveraging people that I knew. So like someone that I went to college with that, we weren't necessarily like great friends, but he helped me kind of understand the profile I should be looking for, if that makes sense. So like use your existing network to say, okay, like what are the second or third degrees? Like for me also, it was like engineers that I'd worked with at Blackbaud, you know, some of which I know are actively involved in the startup community. Like I was just putting feelers out there everywhere. And then so that's like to kind of go deep and see personal connections. But then on a broader scale, the thing that like worked for me actually was when we had money to hire people. I went on a Stack Overflow. Stack Overflow is the site, and it's where engineers go to ask and answer technical questions, but they've launched a hiring platform on it. So it's really smart because like engineers in general aren't the most forefront of like LinkedIn. Like Barry, my technical founder, doesn't have a LinkedIn profile. He hates it. But he's always on Stack Overflow. So there's a hiring platform there. So you can see who's open. You can look for skills. That's actually how we found Barry to begin with. So I would definitely recommend that. And then again, like having that, finding like the people that in your network that are like second or third degree that could kind of help you vet if those people are legit. And don't underestimate like how important it is to find like a good person, like a good human, even if they're an amazing genius engineer. Like again, number one cause of failed startups is co-founder issues. So you want to make sure that like you jive with that person.
Thanks, Lauren. I'll take the next one, Emily. This question comes from Audra, and her question is, when you began marketing with a smaller team, how did you choose what to focus on when there are so many options on the table? For example, social media, direct email, podcasts, cold calling, etc.
I still struggle with this every day, honestly. So again, I would say the best advice that I go back to when I get overwhelmed, because I still like today, I was like, I should have written a blog today. No, I should have done my sales follow-ups today. Like it actually is easier to see what's most important when there's only you or only two, when there's less people. And so that is a learning I'll take into when I do build back up the marketing team, is like, what is the most mission critical thing, which I kind of have been working on just starting backwards on my pipeline. So today we had a really big deal that said they want to move forward. Yay. But that took away from me writing that blog to do like the higher touch, or I'm sorry, the lower touch, the more outreach, because I am prioritizing getting that deal through. And so what I found, actually, I will say that's probably the most helpful answer to your question is do what you feel like you have more of a superpower in doing than the other things. For example, like my superpower is not writing blogs. I can do it, but my superpower for marketing would be writing quick content that people can connect to, and kind of controversial content that could get people to be interested in it. So that's why LinkedIn is a good channel for me, because I can, when I'm thinking of ideas, like I have my shower idea or when I'm walking, I can put it out there and people engage. And then I'm building my network of connections without necessarily trying to sell anything. But then lo and behold, people are coming to my website and then they're trying Loop. And I know people had always said that that works, but I truly didn't believe it until I authentically was posting things that I cared about on LinkedIn. You can't fake it because it's obvious. But I'd say if you're in B2B, like that social aspect is really powerful. But then again, like education and content are really good supplements. I would focus there, and definitely digital, your website. I know I'm sorry, I really struggle with this too.
Everything. It seems like
I have my list of like priorities and I stare at it like, how am I supposed to choose? But figuring it out.
it looks like there's one last question if you wanted to take that.
All right. So the very last question is also from Audra. and it's a really good question. How did you start developing your price points for a new product? I know I've watched a lot of other companies struggle with that, and I'd love to hear your take on it.
Yes. So I also was just evolving this. So we actually just changed our pricing or tweaked it again today. And this is another challenge. So my strategy with Loop when launching was to be disruptive to bigger players in the space. So I wanted it to be really easy to get up and started. You don't have to think twice about it, put it on your credit card. And so the pricing limits for that, for like a credit card purchase, not thinking about it, is usually less than $400. So I wanted to make sure my starting point was that. And then you'd scale up based on more enterprise offerings. Learned that with a new category of software, it doesn't matter how cheap it is, it's going to be long because you're educating people. So I kind of went back on that and really focused on our enterprise plans. And so I would highly recommend thinking about the ROI, the return on investment of your product, because it actually took me closing a bigger deal last month, and they asked for return on investment. So I calculated out, okay, based on the amount of feedback that you're getting, walking through line by line, the manual time it's going to take you to do this, that's how much cost you're going to be saving. And when I saw that it was like a 15 times ROI, like that is too high. And that finally got me to realize how I was leaving too much money on the table with my pricing. And so that's what we just rolled out, was like basically finding that value metric of, for us, it's feedback. So, you know, the more feedback you get, the more value we're providing, because you're not reading through all that feedback manually. So making the pricing scale so it has a strong ROI, but not like a ridiculous ROI, that it actually cheapens what you're doing in a way that just doesn't make sense. So that would be my advice there. Start with return on investment. Like, what is the value you're actually bringing back?
Alrighty, thank you, Lauren. And that looks like that was actually our last question. So just round of applause. I know we can't see most of you, but just Lauren, thank you so much. We're so thankful to have had you on stage today and sharing your story. I'm gonna cut.